Now, the Shadow Priest in Wrath of the Lich King doesn't go through humongous amounts of changes in terms of how the character plays, the rotation, but the output definitely feels a lot higher thanks to changes in the talents, new abilities, so you actually have the ability to AoE now, and much, much more. Ultimately, it's still a dot management class where you're wanting a high uptime on dots and not wanting to move too much, but you have high sustained damage. What you lack in burst, you make up for being able to go all night long. Try not to laugh. If you haven't seen the Disc and the Holy videos that I've put out on what's changed from TBC to Wrath of the Lich King, be sure to check them out, and let's talk Shadow Priest. So what we're going to look at is new abilities that you get in Wrath of the Lich King and how the abilities have changed. We're going to look through the talent tree at what's changed. We're not going to worry too much about things that have minorly changed or just been shifted from one tree to another or things like that. We're looking at the big, impactful, meaningful changes in the talents. And then finally, we're going to look at what glyphs you can get and how they will have an impact on how you play and the sort of damage you do. If you haven't noticed the banner down at the bottom, thank you to every single one of you that have joined the channel as a member. It really does help support the channel and just keeps me here pumping out Wrath of the Lich King, TBC, Classic Era, all the World of Warcraft content you want to see, and all future MMOs. So thank you. There would be a Patreon banner as well, but there ain't any patrons. But there is a link in the description anyway. Let's get a banner up on the screen. There'll be more at the end on how you can help support the channel. But let's get started with new abilities. Now for Shadow, outside of talents, you don't get a great deal new, but you do get Mindseer, which I'm sure you're going to be very happy about, which causes an explosion of shadow magic around the enemy target, causing 241 to 260 shadow damage every 0.91 seconds for 4.54 seconds, based on my haste rating there, to all enemies within 10 yards around the target. So you now actually have AoE. And the more targets there are, the more damage it will be doing. But like you can see, it doesn't do damage to the main target. It only does damage to all the targets around it. Every priest now gets Devouring Plague, which afflicts the target with a disease that causes 1700, let's say, damage over 24 seconds, and 15% of damage caused by Devouring Plague heals the caster. This spell can only affect one target at a time. So no longer a specific racial priest spell. Every priest gets this, and you don't actually have to be Shadow to get it. The same way, once you will remember, Symbol of Hope is now Hymn of Hope, which every priest gets, which restores 3% mana to 3 nearby low mana friendly party or raid targets every 1.82 seconds for 7.27 seconds, and increases their total maximum mana by 20% for 8 seconds. A maximum of 12 mana restores, and the priest must channel this spell to keep it going, basically. And you also get Divine Hymn, which is the HP version of it. So it heals the 3 nearby lowest health-friendly targets for 3k every 1.82 seconds for 7.27 seconds, and increases the healing done to them by 10% for 8 seconds, does 12 heals, and must be channeled, and looks something like this. Every priest also now gets Holy Nova, so that's no longer in the Holy Tree talents. You get this as standard. And Inner Fire is a lot better now. It gives you the armor still, of course, and it's got 20 charges as standard, but you also get 120 spell power, which you can take up to 174 spell power with talents. And it lasts 30 minutes now, up from 10 minutes in TBC. Alongside that, every priest now gets Divine Spirit and Prayer of Spirit. There is no improved Divine Spirit that normally it sits in the discipline tree in TBC. That's removed completely. But every priest gets Divine Spirit. It's no longer a talent. And finally, the one worth talking about really is Mana Burn and how it works. So Mana Burn now destroys 10% of the target's mana up to a maximum of 20% of your own. And for each point of mana taken, it does 0.5 damage. Whereas in TBC, it's just, a flat number, where on this character, it's doing 1021 to 1079, but also does the half a shadow damage for each point drained. So what this basically means, if we was to look at me, I've got 19,000 mana. Let's say I had 20,000 mana. I could be mana burned potentially for 2,000 mana, but I could mana burn for about 4,000 mana because I can do 20% of my mana. So if it was on a boss, I'd do the full 4,000. If I was mana burning someone with a similar mana pool to my own, it would only drain about 2,000 mana and do 1,000 damage. That's basically the abilities and how they've changed, and how some which were racial traits, racial priest abilities, are now just priest abilities for everyone. So you can see you've not really gained that much new outside of Mindseer, really, as a Shadow Priest specifically. But some of the subtle changes will make a big difference. So let's start having a look at the talents. So there's some quite significant changes when it comes to the Shadow Tree. First of all, you'll notice that Spirit Tap's now split into 2 different types of talent. You've got 3 points, which is Spirit Tap, which does almost exactly the same as in TBC, where it gives you a 100% bonus to your spirit after killing a target that yields experience or honor. In TBC, for the duration, your mana will regenerate at 50% of the rate while casting, whereas in Wrath of the Lich King, it's actually 83% of the rate while casting. But you can also now put talent points into Improved Spirit Tap. Whereas Spirit Tap's great if you manage to get that proc on a kill, you can't do a lot mid-fight if there's no adds. But now you can, because Improved Spirit Tap gives your Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death critical strikes a 100% chance, and your Mind Flayed critical strikes a 50% chance to increase your total spirit by 10%, which is very nice. And for the duration, your mana will regenerate at 33% rate while casting, and this lasts 8 seconds. You will have this up the vast majority of the time. And what you'll also notice from the TBC tree, Blackout has now gone, so you've no longer got that 10% chance to stun. Instead, Darkness has moved up. So this is not a new talent. Darkness gives you 10% shadow spell damage. Normally it's a lot further down in the tree, but you now get it in the first tier. From tier 2, there's a couple of minor changes. Shadow Affinity still gives you your 25% threat reduction, but you also receive 15% of your base mana when your Shadow Word Pain or Vampiric Touch spells are dispelled. Now you can see this being particularly useful in PvP, especially for those long arena matches. Improved Shadow Word Pain used to increase the duration, but now it's a flat out 6% damage increase to it, and the reason this is important is because the duration doesn't really matter to you, because your Mind Flay will be refreshing it, as we'll find out from the rest of the talents shortly. Shadow Focus has changed, so it increases your chance to hit with your Shadow spells by 3%, and reduces the mana cost of your shadow spells by 6%. This seems like quite a big nerf, but actually most classes across the board, when it comes to spellcasters, have had their hit from talents reduced massively. It used to be a chance to resist your shadow spells by 10%, now it's only 3%. The next tier remains exactly the same, with Improved Psychic Scream, Improved Mind Blast, and Mind Flay, except for Improved Mind Blast now gives a Mortal Strike effect, and this is just an addition for PvP. But Shadow Priests in Wrath of the Lich King are actually quite strong in PvP. And one of the reasons is that when you Mind Blast, when you're in Shadow form, it has a 100% chance to reduce all healing done to the target by 20% for 10 seconds. And as you're going to see as we go through these talents, not only have you got Fears, you've got Disarm, you've got a lot of things. You've also got a Mortal Strike effect. OP much? Moving down in TBC, where you've got Improved Fade, which just reduces the cooldown of your Fade ability by 6 seconds. This talent has actually been renamed now into Vowed Shadows. Still decreases the cooldown of your Fade ability by 6 seconds, but it also reduces the cooldown of your Shadow Fiend by 2 minutes. And this is huge because you will have mana issues quite early on as a priest, especially in bad gear. Going straight from TBC into Wrath, in sort of full BIS, some well gear, you're probably not going to have many mana issues, but trust me, as a freshly dinged priest, going Shadow into Heroics, it's a nightmare. Shadow Reach remains exactly the same as the Shadow Weaving. You still get your 45-second cooldown Silence, which is very nice, which not only silences, but you can actually use it as a standard sort of interrupt as well. Vampiric Embrace and Improved Vampiric Embrace have changed slightly. So Vampiric Embrace now lasts 30 minutes instead of 1 minute with a 10-second cooldown like it does in TBC. And when you read this tooltip, it heals you for 25% of your shadow damage and other members of the party for 5%. Now, it's actually 15% and 3% if you look at the actual tooltip where I've got myself buffed. When you get Improved Vampiric Embrace, it increases healing received from Vampiric Embrace by 67%. So that's 67% of 15% for you and 3% for the party, which then equates to 25% on you and 5% on the party. Focus Mind remains unchanged, except Mind Seer is now added to this, reducing the mana cost of it by 15%. In TBC, you have Shadow Resilience, which reduces the chance you'll be critically hit by all spells by 4%. Fortunately, that has changed for Mind Melt now, which is an incredible talent for 2 points, increasing the critical strike chance of your Mind Blast, Mind Flay, and Mind Seer spells by 4%. But it also increases the periodic critical strike chance of your Vampiric Touch, Devouring Plague, and Shadow Word Pain spells by 6%. Critting dots for the win. So where Darkness once was, we now have Improved Devouring Plague, which increases the periodic damage done by your Devouring Plague by 15%. And when you cast Devouring Plague, you instantly deal damage equal to 30% of its total effect. So getting that nice instant bit of damage when applying the dot on the move is very nice. And now the huge change to Shadow form. So in TBC, all it literally does is increases your shadow damage by 15% and reduces the physical damage done to you by 15%. Whereas in Wrath of the Lich King, it does that. It increases your shadow damage by 15% and reduces damage taken by 15%, but it also reduces your threat generated by 30%. And you still may not cast holy spells while in form, but you can use Cure Disease and Abolish Disease. But the big one, it grants the periodic damage from your Shadow Word Pain, Devouring Plague, and Vampiric Touch spells the ability to critically hit for 100% increased damage, and grants Devouring Plague and Vampiric Touch the ability to benefit from haste, which is just massive. You know, getting all your dots up, seeing them critically hit, getting haste, so you're going to look for haste breakpoints as a Shadow Priest to be able to get more damage out of a single cast. Absolutely amazing. Literally the single biggest and best change for me personally as a Shadow Priest. Absolutely love to see those dots critting. Shadow Power, which increases the critical strike damage bonus of your Mind Blast, Mind Flare, and Shadow Word Death spells by 100%. Improve Shadow Form, so your Fade ability has a 100% chance to remove all movement impairing effects when used whilst in Shadow Form, and it reduces the casting or channeling time lost by damage by 70% when casting any Shadow spells in Shadow Form. So not only is this really nice for PvP, it's also very nice for PvE situations where you need to get out of slows or snares or anything like that. And AoE or small adds hitting you is not going to interrupt your casting. So Misery is really nice, but a big change from TBC. Just to refresh your memory in TBC, your Shadow Word Pain, Mind Flare, and Vampiric Touch spells cause the target to take an additional 5% spell damage. Now what it does is causes the same spells to increase the chance for harmful spells to hit by 3%, lasting 24 seconds. And on top of that, it increases the benefit from spell power gained by your Mind Blast, Mind Flare, and Mind Seer by 15%. Just to clarify a little bit why that's the case, why you're getting 3% hit on the target now, which it's because Boomkins and actually Unholy DKs bring a lot more increased spell damage taken on targets than 5%. So Vampiric Touch has changed slightly, but to fall in line with other replenishment effects. So when you Vampiric Touch, you now cause 10 party or raid members to gain 1% of their maximum mana per 5 seconds. But in addition to this, if the Vampiric Touch is dispelled, it will cause 792 damage to the afflicted target. So again, you've got a PvP element to this talent tied in, which is nice. Pain and Suffering is the reason we're not worried about losing the extra duration from talents on our Shadow Word Pain, because your Mind Flare has a 100% chance to refresh the duration on your Shadow Word Pain and reduces the damage you take from your own Shadow Word Death by 30%. Getting 5 stacks of Shadow Weaving up, popping all your trinkets, getting a Shadow Word Pain up, and keeping that buffed Shadow Word Pain on all the time through using Mind Flare is massive. Psychic Horror is another addition which for PvP is absolutely overpowered. It's on a 2-minute cooldown. You terrify the target, causing them to tremble in horror for 3 seconds. They will drop their main hand and ranged weapons for 10 seconds. So as a Shadow Priest, not only are you going to freeze them in place, they're also going to be disarmed. It's ludicrous. You've got a good silence. You've got fear, an AoE fear. You've now got a tremor as well, which disarms them. Mental. Twisted Faith increases your spell power by 20% of your total spirit, and your damage done by your Mind Flare and Mind Blast is increased by 10% if your target is afflicted by Shadow Word Pain. So keeping Shadow Word Pain up 100% of the time is obviously incredibly important. Getting the spell power by 20% of your total spirit synergizes very nice with improved Spirit Tap, which increases your spirit by 10% if we go all the way back to the start of the talents. Lots of synergy amongst the talents as a Shadow Priest, which is really good to see. And then last but certainly not least, Dispersion. So it's on a 2-minute cooldown. You disperse into pure shadow energy, reducing all damage taken by 90%. You are unable to attack or cast spells, but you regenerate 6% total mana every second for 6 seconds. Dispersion can be cast while stunned, feared, silenced, and clears all snare and movement impairing effects when cast, and makes you immune to them while dispersed. Now, not only is this great for getting mana back, obviously it seems fairly obvious you will be using it to get mana back on long fights, but there's certain fights where not only are you going to get your mana back, but you can soak things. You can go and take that 90% less damage. It's not capped. So there's certain classes, for example, like a DK, where Anti-Magic Shell will only absorb X amount of damage based on, 50, 75% of their max health, for example. Whereas this is uncapped. It will just negate 90% of the damage of whatever the damage was. So you can solo soak on certain boss mechanics where nobody else can. And obviously, in PvP, it's amazing being able to use it when stunned, feared, whatever. And, you're taking 90% reduced damage. You can then get everything back under control. Maybe you're waiting for your fear to come back off cooldown. There's only a few seconds left. You're getting stun locked down. Bang, disperse, wait till it finishes. Boom, fear them off. There's lots of situations you can use Dispersion in. Overall, just an amazing ability. Really briefly, in the discipline tree, you can get 5% damage and healing from the first tier now, which one specialization has been removed and Twin Disciplines has taken its place. You will probably go down and get improved Inner Fire because, like I said at the beginning, Inner Fire actually gives you spell power, so you can get 45% more spell power from your inner fire. And ultimately, you're probably going to want to get down to meditation so you can get more mana regen while casting, because, as I say, mana can become an issue. You're probably even going to want inner focus, which is exactly the same as it is in TBC. In the Holy Tree, there's really nothing you're going to want. So finally, moving on to the glyphs. I'm only going to talk about shadow-specific glyphs and minor glyphs that add some sort of benefit. So if you don't know about glyphs, they're introduced with Inscription, which will probably be in the pre-patch to Wrath of the Lich King rather than actually Wrath of the Lich King itself. You get 3 major glyphs that you can use and 3 minor glyphs. The major ones normally have more of an impact, increasing damage potential or healing potential or mana gain or CC. They do something really meaningful to one of your abilities. Whereas minor glyphs is normally like removing a reagent cost or reducing the cooldown on something that's not that amazing, maybe just sprint or dash or something like that, So let's have a look at the glyphs. So Glyph of Dispersion reduces the cooldown of dispersion by 45 seconds, and as standard, it's a 2-minute cooldown. So being able to get this massive amount of mana back very regularly or soak certain big mechanics or even just reduce the amount of damage coming in on a raid-wide mechanic every 1 minute 15 seconds is huge. Glyph of Shadow Word Pain just means the periodic damage ticks of your Shadow Word Pain spell restore 1% of your base mana. So if you are for some reason having mana issues, this could be a potential glyph to use. Not that it's going to add any real damage if you're not going during a fight. Glyph of Mind Seer increases the radius by 5 yards, so if you want to do some AoE or cleave, but the ads are a little bit too spread because it's 10 yards by default, this will increase it to 15 yards. This could be a potential for certain fights. Glyph of Shadow is almost a must because while in Shadow form, your non-periodic spell critical strikes increase your spell power by 30% of your spirit, and you're going to have quite a lot of spirit as a Shadow Priest, and quite honestly, getting 30% of it, you're more or less going to have this up all the time. Glyph of Shadow Word Death, which targets below 35% take an additional 10% damage from your Shadow Word Death spell. You're not going to be using Shadow Word Death an awful amount, really, so definitely a weaker glyph, but it is still an option. Glyph of Mind Flay increases the damage done by your Mind Flay spell by 10% when your target is afflicted by Shadow Word Pain. You're always going to be Mind Flaying onto a Shadow Word Pained target, so this is quite literally 10% damage on your Mind Flay. Can't see many Shadow Priests playing without it. The only other one I'll mention is for PvP, so Glyph of Psychic Scream, which increases the duration of your Psychic Scream by 2 seconds and increases its cooldown by 8 seconds. And then when it comes to minors, all the minors are the same as in the Disc and Holy videos if you've seen those already. So Glyph of Fading, which reduces the mana cost of your Fade spell by 30%. Glyph of Fortitude, which reduces the mana cost of your Power Word Fortitude and Prayer of Fortitude spells by 50%. Glyph of Levitate, which is probably going to be the one that most people go for because your Levitate spell will no longer require a reagent. Glyph of Shackle Undead increases the range of your Shackle Undead spell by 5 yards. Glyph of Shadow Protection increases the duration of your Shadow Protection and Prayer of Shadow Protection spells by 10 minutes. And Glyph of Shadow Fiend, which is again one that most priests will use because you will receive 5% of your maximum mana if your Shadow Fiend dies from damage. So it's just a consolation prize. If your Shadow Fiend dies, you still get a little bit of mana back. And that's it. That's the Shadow Priest in a nutshell. All the changes from TBC to Wrath of the Lich King. I really hope you enjoyed the video. There's going to be guides for all of these specs going out before Wrath of the Lich King launches, as well as pre-BIS guides and lots more content. So be sure to subscribe. But if you want to know how else you can support the channel, watch the outro and I'll see you on the next one. There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes. Everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name. And you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.